And that morning, in two of the English-speaking newspapers, there was a picture of two UFOs. So I had placed those on his table where he was going to be sitting. And I said, "Good morning, Mr. President." President Kennedy says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "From what I've learned, we can't be the only living beings in God's creation." And he says, "You're right, young man. There is considerable knowledge as far as the actual being of UFO and ET phenomena that we're aware of today."
Basically, Majestic 12 was set up exclusively to focus on all of the issues and the policies concerning extraterrestrial life and technologies that had come into the possession of the US military, while at the same time feigning ignorance that such technologies existed. And as we go through the history of MJ12, we see that its policies have been mainly oriented towards keeping all of this information highly classified, restricting access to only a very small group within the US military-industrial complex that was wanting to monopolize these kinds of technologies and to develop them for their own benefit, where only select individuals would be given access, and all of the others, no matter how senior they are, these people would be excluded if it wasn't deemed that they had need-to-know access. Kennedy believed that the office of the president needed to be well in the loop on this issue and actually involved in the policy making, and not just leave it to this unelected committee to make policy. And we see this actually coming into full-blown conflict, where you have a president basically saying to the MJ12 committee, "Hey, you guys, you've got to report to me, give me all the information, and this is where policy is made." And the MJ12 committee basically saying, "No, we're the ones that make policy, and you shouldn't interfere in something that you don't have a need to know."
James Forrestal, who was originally Secretary of the U.S. Navy and would a few years later become the U.S. Secretary of Defense under President Truman. He became part of MJ12 and was also kind of crucial to Kennedy's understanding of and involvement with the reality of the UFOs and the aliens.
And Forrestal, from the very beginning, was involved in basically all the data that the US military had been gathering on extraterrestrial life. He was the one that proposed Operation Paperclip, and Forrestal took Kennedy, who at the time was beginning to write articles, and as a kind of freelance writer, he was a book author. And so Kennedy had direct access to the technologies, the high-level military officials and political discussions that were all taking place in Germany at the time, involving Operation Paperclip. And Kennedy learned from Forrestal what was going on. And later on, when Kennedy decided that he would enter politics rather than joining Forrestal in the Navy, then Kennedy continued to be briefed by Forrestal.
So that kind of provides the backdrop for 15 years later, when Kennedy becomes president.
both Forrestal and Kennedy, they really did want to have the best people involved at all levels of government, whereas the many of the members of the MJ12 committee that was wanting to monopolize these kinds of technologies and to develop them for their own benefit, their view was, let's kind of like see how this can help us with our agenda. And so this was the policy struggle between Forrestal and others within the Majestic 12 committee, and eventually that was what led to him being ousted as Secretary of Defense by Truman in 1949 in March, and then 2 months later basically being killed, and kind of showed just how powerful the Majestic 12 committee was. We know that Kennedy actually did meet Eisenhower twice before becoming president. I think it's very reasonable to assume that Eisenhower would have been more specific in these private meetings with Kennedy about the nature of this threat that the military-industrial complex played. During this entire period, while Kennedy was making inquiries about UFOs, what's going on, he realized that it was all being run by the CIA. Dulles, as both the director of the CIA and as MJ1, circulates a set of draft directives basically directly implicated in the assassination of Kennedy. Anyone threatening Majestic 12 operations can be assassinated. And that pertains to any public official, no matter how high. There's no restriction there.